So I did think he might be a dentist, and it also reminds me of the smiles in season 1.
I mean, I think of teeth and using those as like a way to identify bodies.
Seeing Helly's reaction, which this has to be so weird for Helly because she woke up in the gala, she wakes up to being drowned, and then wakes up in the elevator again. And now Mark has this weird, disdain for her.
So I think there's been some very interesting perspective shifts. I think that one of the biggest ones for me is Mr. Milchick. He was told, you instituted kindness reforms, and Mr. Milchick shot back with, because I'm not Harmony Cobell. Maybe Mr. Milchick was actually trying to use honey instead of vinegar. Hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today, Mark B. and I are talking about the hit science fiction TV show Severance Season 2, Episode 5, Trojan's Horse, so spoilers are ahead. And because we're a small channel, if you're enjoying the content, then we would appreciate it if you would consider subscribing or giving the video a like. And with that, what are your thoughts on the cold open? That was interesting.
Well, it's funny because, the first time I watched the episode, it was I saw it, it registered with me, and then, there's a lot that happens in the episode, and it doesn't even address that. It doesn't come back to that at all. There's no mention of it. So, after the first watch, it kind of just, left my mind. And, as I was, pondering about the episode and thinking about it until my second watch, then I see the cold open again. I was like, this is such a random, weird thing. We don't see this guy's face. He looked possibly like a dentist to me.
It definitely looked like he was getting dental tools is what they kind of look like to me.
Yeah, and I thought maybe his shirt, he had a short white sleeve shirt with a pocket, almost like a dental coat kind of thing. So I did think he might be a dentist. And it also reminds me of the smiles in season 1. Remember when they're in the Egan's house?
Yes.
And they're all of these smiles are people we affected. So that was my connection with the dental equipment.
Man, when I think of dental equipment, I think of teeth and using those as a way to identify bodies.
Ooh.
They apparently have inroads with, morgues and all sorts of other industries. And so, I don't know, kind of lining that up with something else that was mentioned in this episode, which is that they have bereavement kits. And those are only for innies that have died on the inside. Makes me wonder, how many times has this happened that they have bereavement kits ready to go for this kind of thing? Do they cover that up? How do they cover it up? Because we've seen an article about them covering up injuries. So I'm sure if there's a death, they would want to cover that up. And I even wonder if they would work with certain people to cover it up outside of Lumen. So it didn't even look like Lumen has any recorded deaths.
Interesting. But it is odd too that okay, so in the bereavement package, they all had a coffee cup with Irving on there. And we also see the coffee cups have each one of their faces. So it's almost in a way they're expecting them to die at some point.
Yeah.
It seems like all of them have the opportunity. You would think MDR of all places wouldn't be dangerous where people would die on the floor, but yet they all had a bereavement kit ready.
Yeah, it's weird. Also with as far as things that they have on hand that I saw in the cold open, as he's wheeling that cart, it shows a bunch of the supplies coming from O&D that they have in storage. And I know that this is just kind of a minor point, but it does look like they produce most, if not everything that is in-house. When we first saw a bunch of that stuff in season 1, in the kitchenette and their supplies where it has Lumen coffee and they have, Lumen water and Lumen food and Lumen paper and pens and pencils. I really do think now that we've seen what O&D can create, that that Lumen really does produce all of this stuff. And we did even get like the throwaway line in this season that Lumen makes its own doors.
Right.
It just shows that they have like huge manufacturing capability and near limitless, like what they can produce.
What's odd is they have this like technology that seems like they can produce like almost like 3D print anything, right? Like they can make near next to anything. But what's weird is the outside world also seems very dated. We don't see like any computers being used out there. We see like these old versions of cars. There's payphones. Like when was the last time you saw a payphone? And like when Ricken was typing on his typewriter, he's not typing on a computer to type this thing up. He's typing on an old typewriter. So it is weird that it does seem a little old-timey out there and a little more futuristic in Lumen of what they can print and create.
Right. It's hard to tell how much of this is because Lumen has a grip on this town of Kier. And so, like, maybe they've limited imports, and so they have been able to kind of control what is available there. Or if some of this is because, you know, I mentioned this in the last episode, that Ben Stiller confirmed that this is kind of in, like, an alternate universe. You know, so sometimes when we're trying to figure out why things are so weird, it might just be because that's the way this whole world is. It may not necessarily be because Lumen is doing it. So it's hard to tell what is because of Lumen and how much is just like this weird world they've created.
Yeah, and having such a small understanding of the bigger world, like we are this narrow focus of what sounds like they live in Kier. So it's like the place is called Kier. We've only interacted with this like handful of people. You know, we know that there's a senator that lives near Kier, maybe.
Right.
And so the scope of the world, even though we know that like Lumen has like 206 branches around the world, like they have like their hands everywhere, but we've had such a small scope that we don't quite know the scope of Lumen and what they are in terms of like the outside world.
Right. And you know, knowing that they have so many branches can also help us understand why they would have the experience to know about like having bereavement kits on hand, you know, because they are a much bigger company than it may look like when we just think of this one kind of building. So they have had a lot of experience.
So should we talk about Milchick and Ms Huang?
Yes. So I think there's been some very interesting perspective shifts with the show. Like some of the people that I've thought one way of, I'm now starting to feel another way. And I feel like they're doing it really well. But I think that one of the biggest ones for me is Mr. Milchick. You know, in his performance review, you know, he was told, you instituted kindness reforms. And Mr. Milchick shot back with, because I'm not Harmony Cobell, which kind of reframes a lot of what I thought episode 1 was. Like I mentioned that, you know, season 2, episode 1, that it seemed like they were doing a lot of like, you know, psychological warfare because they were doing things that seemed nice, but I assumed like there has to be these insidious intentions behind everything. But it turns out that maybe Mr. Milchick was actually trying to use honey instead of vinegar. And yes, he was lying about things, but it's because like he wanted them to be happy and work from this place of happiness.
Right. It is a different technique, you know, and it's like, I think Milchick didn't see a huge harm in letting them do all of this because Helena Egan was with them. So, you know, they have a Trojan horse, so to speak, that is following along and figuring out what they're doing. So I think that Milchick was probably in the right because, I mean, like, if you looked at what Miss Cobell did when she locked him down, that's like when they fought the hardest, right? So like Milchick was like, all right, well, what if we do give them more hall passes and let them wander around? Like, who cares if they figure out, like, they're never going to figure out the like bigger thing that they're doing because each department doesn't know what they're doing. So like, who cares if they wander around a bit?
But that's like such a perception shift for me to find out that, I mean, yes, I still don't like the fact that he is helping this company because I don't trust this company, but I do at least feel like he's trying to do something positive. And it's weird how, like, seeing this tension between him and Miss Huang that's coming up.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that, but I also want to say that I think that what if also MDR is wearing on Milchick a little bit, right? Like, Milchick has worked with MDR quite a bit in Miss Huang's role originally, and
Right.
now that he's in charge of them, and now he gets the pictures that have kind of disillusioned his view of Kier, and so like he was this devout person towards Kier. Now MDR has been kind of fighting against this whole thing, and he's close with them. So in a way, maybe he's starting to feel a little bit like them in a rebellious way.
Right. I mean, especially with, like, MDR is wearing on him. He's getting, abrasion from Miss Huang. His, performance review went horribly.
Well, and Miss Huang is ratting him out.
Yes. And not just ratting him out, but for like the pettiest things humanly possible. Like the first two things. Well, I thought it was funny that it was like, these are anonymous, right? But it's painfully clear who is saying that it's too many words, or the words are too big. Who's saying that he's using paper clips in a way that is confusing. And they even said that they checked it out and they verified it and kind of like showed him a report, which means that they probably gave away who said it.
Right.
In doing all of that. Yeah. So like, he's getting it from all sides. And the thing that I thought was like really demoralizing. Okay, so if you get a performance review and they want to start off with the positives, right? Tell me how well this company thinks that you're doing if this is what the company says about you. We gave you a gift and you received it with grace. Your attendance is great. And your urine is great.
Sounds good. Sounds like you got all the right things and your body's healthy. So, you're keeping good care of yourself.
Like they're scraping the bottom of the barrel if the only three things that they can come up with are those. And like one of them is, all of your urine values are excellent.
Yeah. I mean, I also kind of find it funny that like one thing that they were, pegging him on was that he used these big words. But like every time Mr. Drummond speaks, he's also using very big words. So he's not in trouble for it. It's just Milchick. So I think that is, and maybe we'll see later on that there's this hypocrisy among Lumen, but I think that's telling to be like, you get in trouble for this, but I will not.
Yeah.
So
I do wonder whether or not they put assistants to the managers of the severed floor that cause abrasion or are kind of working for Lumen to spy on the managers, because when Miss Cobell was in place, it seemed like there was tension between her and Mr. Milchick and that there was distrust there. And now that we're seeing Mr. Milchick in the role, we're seeing that there's like distrust and abrasion with Miss Huang.
Well, and I think part of that is originally it's like Milchick wanted Cobell's job, which he now got. And I do feel like Miss Huang wants Milchick's job. Like, I think that, when she was talking about the whole bereavement thing, and she's just like, you can't let them feel like people. Otherwise, they'll feel like people and try to rebel. Like, you need to keep them feeling like the animals that they are. And I think that, she brings this up to him and it throws the thing like, is your performance review today? Because she is vying for his job, which, you know what? I say give it to Miss Huang. She's more than capable.
That was also the third reference to what the innies are like, and it's not necessarily human or people, because Helena says they're fucking animals. Miss Huang says, we shouldn't do the bereavement, otherwise it makes them feel like people. And then Mr. Drummond's was a little bit more vague, but it still said the same kind of thing. He told Seth to remember these severed workers' greater purpose and to treat them as what they are, which to me doesn't sound like, treat them like people. It sounds like treat them like
drones, worker bees, just doing their job.
Right.
Yeah. So very, very, very odd. One thing I noticed with Drummond as well, when Helena comes back and she brings up the fact that she feels unsafe with what had happened over the Ortbo, the disastrous Ortbo,
right?
Which is another reason Milchick is not doing a good job. But when she's talking about father, she calls him father, and should we let father know? Which it does seem like he does know, even though they said they weren't going to tell him. But either way, Drummond calls him father as well.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think. I know his name is Mr. Drummond.
Mm-hmm.
But is he related to Helena? Or is it like a religious feeling of father? Like he is the father. He is our guidance. I don't know with Drummond.
That's what I mean, if physical appearance tells us anything, James is a small person. Helena, is like a normal sized person. Mr. Drummond is a friggin' behemoth. I mean, it's possible that he came from that family, but he certainly doesn't quite look like it. I do kind of lean more towards the religious-y aspect. And it's so weird that at times it seems like Mr. Drummond is in closer communication with James than his own daughter. But going back to what you said about James not knowing or knowing, I don't think it was about the Ortbo and how it went. So Dawn said something interesting, which is what if he didn't know that it was... So in, what was it, the last episode when, or 2 episodes ago, when Mr. Drummond initially said, we're going to send Helly down, it sounded like the plan coming from James was to send Helly down there. And that possibly, Helena convinced them to let her go so she'd have a little bit more control, and or maybe she gets a little bit more freedom to live this life or whatever. And that's what James didn't know. So he knows that there was an Ortbo. He knows that it went disastrously, that they had to fire Irving, but he doesn't know that it was actually Helena down there, and that's what they possibly kept from him.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes more sense, because I was wondering, because it said he didn't know, and then they were like, oh, it was disastrous, and he doesn't want it to screw up again. So I was kind of like, does he know? Does he not know? Very, very confused. But yeah, and I am sad I missed the last Ortbo episode to talk about, because that was a wild episode. We won't go into it because you guys already did a great job covering it, but that was just a crazy episode. And
that was a wild episode. But so I'm honestly feeling bad about Helena as well, because I'm seeing a different perspective of her, of how locked down her life is, which makes it more understandable why she wanted to go into Helly's shoes. Because there's the comment about, the medical team will rebalance her tempers, and perhaps another obligement session, is in order. So it sounds like everything is controlled down to her emotional state.
Yeah.
And then, she's told what to do. She doesn't get the choice of going down or not. She doesn't get the choice of if it's Helly or Helena. That's decided. It sounds like it's coming from father. And yet, James isn't communicating that with her. He's communicating that through other people. Like, imagine making your daughter do all of this stuff and not even telling it to her face.
Yeah.
But telling it to somebody else to tell it to her.
And it was odd because, like, after they told Helena that Helly was going back in, they said the board. So it didn't even come from James at that point. It was literally the board saying it. And we've theorized what the board could be. So it's like, is the board making this decisions for Helly or Helena?
Right.
And they just like don't include Egan? Is the board a group of the Egan's consciousness? Who knows? We don't know. We'll figure that out at some point, I'm assuming. But seeing how Helena being afraid to go back in there because Helly's tried to kill her, try to cut off her hand, Irving now try to drown her. Like, as somebody that wouldn't understand innies, them being that like comparison to animals, like she probably legitimately fears them, and they even acknowledge that there is a risk sending you back down, and it's like, you have to sacrifice this. Like, this is on you. You need to take this. Good luck. Hopefully you don't die down there.
That's two awful levels of lack of control. Like the one control of like, she doesn't get to make the choice, but that second lack of control of once she's down there, it's not even her making the decisions. So it's not like, oh, well, let me at least try to be careful while I'm down there in order to protect myself. Like, no, at that point, it's in Helly's hands. And like you pointed out, Helly doesn't have a great track record of trying to take care of Helena.
Yeah. And then we see this new take. Like, we've known that the Audis are like feeling like the innies have like a different part of their life. But this was an interesting take, seeing that like an innie feels violated that an Audi took her role. Like, basically assumed that she was her, assumed that was her position. And so seeing Helly's reaction, which this has to be so weird for Helly because she hasn't woken up. She woke up in the gala. Yep. She's been asleep or dead, however you want to think of what happens to innies when they don't come back. She wakes up to being drowned and then wakes up in the elevator again. So for Helly, her existing time has been very skewed. And then she went out, came back in, and now Mark has this weird like disdain for her.
I know. I don't think this episode has had the saddest moments compared to other things, but I do think there was just kind of like an overall sadness. Like, it was very sad seeing Mark lashing out at Helly for what Helena did to him. It's sad seeing the way that Dylan reacts to the Irving stuff. It's sad seeing what Milchick is going through, what Helena is going through. Like, it just kind of looks like it sucks for everybody. But I think the stuff going on with MDR was the stuff that like really hit the most, is like how everything that's happened has really hurt the team. And then Mark's hurt in particular is really causing a fracture because he's being a dick to both of them.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like he's justified, because if you found out that like you're trying to take down the Egans, and then Helena Egan Trojan horses her way in, tricks you into believing, knows all of your moves that you were doing. So like, clearly they don't care that you're doing these moves because they're letting you do them. So like your purpose feels empty now. And you were also tricked to have sex with somebody you thought was somebody else, kind of thing. Right. And I think that like there would probably be like, and especially if it's like your first time, like there's got to be a lot of shame in that. And so, I mean, and still never knowing. is this Helly? Is this Helena? Because there is such a similarity and the ease at which she was able to assume that position, he can never truly know. And it's now put this huge wedge in their relationship, and I feel bad.
But it's also interesting seeing like the way that Mark reacts, because I absolutely agree with everything you said about why he has like a right to react in a negative way. But the way he reacts, to me, not everybody reacts this way. And it reminds me very much of Outie Mark, which is when he gets in a tough emotional situation, the way that he protects himself from getting hurt is by lashing out at the person across from him. He's been, he's been rude to Devin. He's been rude to the girl he was seeing. And this is the first time that we're kind of seeing him get really emotionally hurt and lash out at, people like other innies. And so it just very much reminded me of kind of how Outie Mark protects himself after everything he's been through. And I don't know if that's like Outie Mark bleeding into Innie Mark, or if that just points to this whole idea of they are the same person. They just have had different experiences.
I mean, I could see both ways, because like it might be integration that's causing this bleed through to happen a little bit more, where like Innie Mark doesn't have the reaction to certain stimulus, so he's usually more calm, and that now it's since that wall is collapsing between their consciousness, that maybe he can pull from there. But also, like, this is probably the worst thing that's ever happened to him, and
right.
Maybe it is just how Mark would react to that situation. It's really hard to say. I'm curious, do you think that at that end of the episode, when he has that like reintegration moment, the first time when he's in MDR,
okay,
and he leaves 6 minutes early, is that Outie Mark? Because there's certain things that he says that makes me think that it's Innie Mark, but I might be like a hybrid of the two, because Innie Mark says, that paper you showed me, the bullshit Gazette. So it shows that he was there to see that.
Yep.
But then he also says, we're doing the weird thing with the numbers, which that seemed like a very Outie Mark thing to say. Like, he doesn't quite know what he's doing with these weird numbers, where like Innie Mark knows it's refining data. So it's like, was that a hybrid integration of them? And that's why he decided to leave 6 minutes early.
I could see it either way, because I can also see that comment about the numbers as being his way of lashing out. And finally, like previously, he said the very corporate response of the work is mysterious and important. That doesn't change the fact that you're just putting weird numbers in weird boxes and you don't know why, so that's a way of showing, like, I'm not just spewing the corporate drivel. Look, I'm doing my job. I'm sorting these numbers, but I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, it's such a weird, like, it's such a easily interpretable way that it could be either, because we just see him when he looks at the photo, he sees the pills that he had like taken earlier, and so there is that. Was it Mark? Was it Mark S? I don't know. There's
such good attention to detail with the language in the scripts. Like, you can tell that words were put there for a specific purpose, and they can sometimes have ambiguity. They can sometimes like give hints about how weird this place is, because like they'll use words that are like somewhat antiquated, or I love the attention to detail. It doesn't seem like anything was kind of rushed to be written. It seems like every word is so intentional, and it can lead you down these brilliant rabbit holes of like, is it this or is it this? And there are arguments for just about any of them.
Yeah. And to that point as well, like every shot feels intentional as well. So like they are so meticulous about shots and words, specifically when Mark is talking to Helly and like Helly has him confronted, and there's this like weird shot where Mark is kind of fading out. Like as they're looking at each other. And I feel like that's that way of showing that he is slowly being reintegrated. And so that any mark is technically fading from existence because any mark and outing mark will become one mark. And so in a way he might not exist anymore. And so he's like fading out. Similarly, when he's talking to Milchick in the elevator, there's like a clear divide between them as they're talking that shows that like they're on opposite sides of this, you know, thought process of like how they want to view MDR. And because Milchick had his performance review and he needs to tighten the leash on MDR, he moves into Mark's side like of that line to show that he is in control, he has the power, and that he can cross both lines, but Mark cannot. So
even something as simple as like when Helly confronts Mark, the shot of the two of them talking, Mark is partially obscured by that wall, and he's walled himself off. And that wall is like a literal interpretation of what he's doing to himself. And it's such a great choice because most people would want to make sure that your subjects are, you know, well shot and you can see everything about them. And that's such a brilliant choice to actually hide part of one of your two main subjects.
Oh yeah. And also another great moment was when the other time when Helly confronts him in the bathroom and he's questioning her, and there's Helly and Helly in the mirror. So there's like Mark is here, and there's both of the Hellys. And so it's like, is it Helly? Is it Helena? We have two versions of them. We don't know. Like everything in this show is so planned out, so brilliant. Like I love that whoever, like all of the people that are making this have so much passion behind it that they are taking the time to put these great details in it, and it's awesome.
Yes. And we've said it before, but also like their ability to insert humor done in such a deadpan way where it's like there's nothing humorous about it for the characters involved, but there is real humor to us. Like when Milchick and Mr. Drummond are, you know, doing the performance review, and he says if it's more than 4 hours, you know, there'll be the food order, and Mr. Milchick is like, well, I hope it's not, you know, I hope that's not the case. And then Mr. Drummond passes the food order to him.
Just there you
go. It's such an awful situation, right? And I don't know like how anybody inserts a joke and doesn't have it be a punchline, you know, that a character is delivered, but it's brilliant. It's so well done.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. They're really good at like hiding things from previous episodes into this episode. Like I don't know if you caught this. Like, do you know how Dylan found that thing under that picture?
I assume that goes back to when Irving said hang in there.
He says hang in there.
Which, okay, so I said that in the last episode. I thought it was a coded message. I thought it was a different coded message. But the funny thing is, I wouldn't have picked up on it if during episode 1, if you hadn't gone over each of those posters, because I didn't look at them super closely. And you had mentioned that you talked about like the fact that it's the two switches. I love that point. And it was on like, it was actually when I heard Dawn watching it. I'd done my 2 watches, and it was like the 3rd time, and I heard it as I was doing something else, and I was like, I remember Mark talking about this.
Yeah. And well, so I watched this episode and I had like totally forgot why he reached, like when he went behind that painting, I was like, why would he look there? Like why? And it like dawned on me that he said hang in there in the last episode. And I was like, this is brilliant. And just so many good, brilliant things. Episode 1, when he's ready to quit MDR, Irving, and he says, I hope that, you know, Bert's outie, if he doesn't exist, or Innie doesn't exist anymore, and my Innie doesn't exist anymore, maybe they can be together. And as soon as Irving gets fired, him and Bert are together. They're having a ham and some wine. And so, yeah, he says, I hope they can be together in some weird way. And they are. So,
and they are, yes.
It's everything in the show, every word counts, every shot counts, everything counts. Noticing in the intro, like all the different things that we've been finding throughout the episode, like that gross stuff he's drinking.
Yes.
There's
the pills he's taking.
The pills he's taking. All of these little clues that we could have picked up in the intro, and we just... so well done. I love the show.
Absolutely. You mentioned Bert and them meeting up. I just want to say I love Bert's taste. I love that he's like expensive wine.
Oh, you would like that. You would like that.
I do. And I love throwing that out there because it's a smidge of an imposition. You know, it's one thing to say like, you know, we've got the food, you go ahead and bring drinks, but then to throw out, you know, make sure it's good.
Yeah, we like expensive. But I mean, it is kind of a weird imposition that Irving put on them that like, you know, and we got the confirmation that Bert didn't retire. He was literally fired.
Right.
Like, I feel like we kind of suspected that could have been the case.
Yes.
But we got his video from his outie. It seemed all like everything was right, and it turns out he got canned for, which I think is a good way that when Irving shows up, that Bert can kind of like piece together like, okay, did I have this relationship with this person? Is this a weird thing? How's Fields gonna feel about this?
Right.
Who's Fields? I don't know.
Then that's an interesting name. So it does kind of make you wonder. And it's, you know, I'm also so curious about if Bert and Irving are able to figure anything out, how do they get that information to the inside, you know, since both of them have been fired, you know? So who is that person that Bert has been, or that Irving has been talking to? Like, can that person potentially, I feel like that person could be Ragabi. I'd mentioned that before, and possibly Miss Cobell, because we haven't seen her for a few moments, and obviously she's gonna come back. And Miss Cobell did always have like the two sides of her,
right?
And so now kind of seeing what Mr. Milchick has gone through of basically he tried to be nice, and in the end they're like, no, don't do that. Like, they're not people. You've got to like rule with an iron fist. It kind of makes me wonder whether or not the Miss Cobell we saw on the inside, who's like throwing mugs at Mark's head, if that's more of the act in order to make the people in Lumen happy so that she can achieve whatever personal purpose she has, which I assume is somehow related to, you know, that bracelet, Charlotte Cobell.
I mean, I do have a lot of like just weird theories that maybe Gemma is dead. And I know we said that this is not, you know, they ruled out cloning, but like maybe they ruled it out too easily, too fast, that clones are a thing.
Somebody in the comments did say the lady doth protest too much.
Yeah.
So like that could be, who knows? So
my thought is, if Miss Casey is like a clone and Cold Harbor is like Mark's memories or something to try to like rebuild her, that could make sense that Miss Cobell is trying to bring someone back to life that, and maybe it's not cloning. Maybe it's like taking a consciousness and putting it in like a replica's body. So it's not cloning. It's like the actual person. You're just moving them over. So potentially Miss Cobell has her consciousness somewhere, and is trying to bring her back to life. Potentially,
or whether or not they're programming so that they can have a servants, army, whatever,
bring the Egans back, all of them.
Yeah.
There is still a lot of questions and a lot of things we don't know. I could see that it being Ragabi on the phone.
Okay.
It does seem like with Petey, the first reintegration, she went too fast. It's what it seems like to me. She just like reintegrated Petey, tried to mash all the memories together
and
quickly.
She said that he didn't follow her directions. And that if he had, then it wouldn't have gone down like this.
And I believe somebody in our comments mentioned that Irv might be reintegrated. And I could see that at least a piece of reintegration. So I think that could lead to Ragabi. Like in this episode specifically, seeing Mark see the picture turn into the pills, it reminded me of when Irving first saw the black goo, which we now know is paint.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of torn on like whether or not that is, using sleep deprivation, if Irving is able to get his innie to fall asleep, which allows some information to kind of go through via like dreams, or if it's like partial reintegration where he like started the process, never finished, and so some things bleed through because of that.
Yeah, that's where I think I'm at on what it could be.
And then there's at the end, and this is heartbreaking for me because it's one of my absolute favorite characters because of how like dumbly pure he is, and now he doesn't seem all that pure, which is Ricken. And it's sad for me to see him. It seemed like he was a scholar, and the kind of person that did things because they were, scholarly and pure for that reason, versus somebody who ends up being a corporate shill. And so the idea that he is rewriting this to, befit Natalie's vision is sad to me. And the only thing I can hope for is that but I don't think that that this is the case. The only thing I can hope for is that he really could somehow have written in a Trojan's horse of, it looks like it checks all the boxes, and it looks like it definitely is furthering the story that they want to tell, and like really getting into like the innies' heads. But he's like somehow written in some back door, which could allow some kind of revolution. But I don't really think that highly of him, that like his stuff is such like drivel that I can't imagine that he's really done it.
It is hard to, I'm on the fence too, because I feel his group all kind of has this like negative view towards the severed process. And I think Devin was that as well. And Devin has always seemed like the voice of reason. And so if Devin can't tell that there is a Trojan's horse, maybe she doesn't think that the innies will find a Trojan horse. And just hearing the blurb that she read, it felt very like propaganda, like, be glad you're here.
Yeah.
And, I don't think Ricken is the smartest guy. Like, he is a scholar, maybe, but, he writes the book, The UUR, and he puts a picture of himself. It's a very, like, odd choice.
Right.
So I know you love Ricken. I know he's your boy.
I do.
And hopefully he'll be redeemed, because he does say there's two things he says. It's a fiscal and a the freedom of like his art opportunity to like,
Mm-hmm.
like he,
Yeah.
so I feel like he thinks he has freedom maybe, but he's also, it seems like he's parroting the talking points. So
Yeah.
but the fact that they're bringing this in, and I want to think that we still love Ricken. He's a dad. He's Devin's baby's dad.
They just had a baby. So like, I get he's trying to be responsible, and he may not agree with this company, but he also, I don't think he knows what atrocities they're committing. He might think that they're like a bad company, but not like an awful company. And so he might just think like, look, I'm doing the right thing for our family, for our kid.
Or he might be a little narcissistic, and as soon as Lumen came in and was like, hey, you do such great work, we love you, it like stroked that ego of his, and that he was just like, oh, like almost like I can relinquish what is important to me because of a paycheck, because of the creative freedom. I'm very up in the air with Ricken, if it's good or bad.
I know.
But no matter what happens, I'll be there for you. So if Ricken turns out to be a secret Egan, I remember there was a time in our early reviews when we were trying to figure out who Ricken was, and we thought he was some deep-seated agent. That he was an Egan in disguise, and he was...
And whether or not his weird group was something.
So it still could be a possibility. Right. But whatever happens, I'll be there for you. I will make sure that we will get through this together. And, you know, no matter what happens, if Ricken is good or bad, I'll still be here for you. But with that, I think our journey has come to an end. Thank you, folks, so much for joining along. Come back next week as we do the 6th episode of Severance Season 2. We look forward to seeing you then. But until then, I'm Mark, and this is Sterling.
Thanks.